an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, covering The Hunger Games, Book 3, Mockingjay, Chapters 11 and 12, and a live read of Chapter 13. In these chapters, Peeta is rescued. Shocking. But Peeta doesn't seem quite right. Welcome to Unspoiled.
Are you coming to the tree? They strung up a man, they say, who murdered 3. Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. Are you coming to the tree where dead men called out for his love to flee? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. Are you?
Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha.
I'm Rashawn.
Okay. So, I gotta ask what you think is happening here.
At the end of chapter 12, when he, let me see, what does it say? Fingers lock around her throat. What do I think he's fucking crazed is what I think.
Crazed? How? What do you mean by that?
I'm hoping because it's weird because he's been on the ship for, I don't know exactly how long, but she was, she was out of the loop.
Right.
And so I don't know exactly how long he's been on the ship and what his reaction was to being rescued. But I am personally choosing to believe he is so traumatized by what's happened and that they being the Capitol may have told him some things about Katniss that are just hopefully categorically untrue. And that the trauma of the torture, whatever lies and weirdo mental games they were playing with him, the stress of the rescue, him not understanding what's going on, I'm hoping all of that just turned into a ball of temporary psychosis.
Gotcha.
And that it is not anything that can't be undone.
Okay.
But the fact that he seemed to have been calm in this room until they bring her in is concerning to me. Like,
that's true.
Like,
yeah.
if he had been restrained, that would have indicated to me, oh, he was just wilding out on everybody and they had to put him in restraints. But he's not. And so that means it suggests a level of either calmness or calm sort of implies like an internal calmness. So I want to use another word as well, like maybe just sort of stunned and shocked to where he wasn't reacting to anything that was happening to him. He was sort of like catatonic.
Right. Yes.
And then sees her and comes out of that and is just like, "Arr!"
I know I really shouldn't laugh, but
short
that
of
was funny.
short of that, I really don't understand. I don't know. It was very hard to put the book down at that page. You told me it would be very hard to stop, and it was.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, we're going to have to back it up here. Let's start with chapter 11, because what Prim says at the end of the last chapter, when she says, what do you think they'll do to him? She says, whatever it takes to break you. And that's what she starts off with the next chapter, is what will break me. And they are still in the bunker. They're underground listening to the bombings. And it's mentioned how it's all very spread out. There's no urgency to it. They're just trying to get them thinking that this is over finally, and then they drop again.
Yeah.
And it's this intermittent, ceaseless,
yeah. I love
wearing them
this.
down.
She says it feels like it's designed more to keep them in lockdown than to actually decimate 13, which suggests kind of like, all right, she thinks maybe it's to stop the airtime assaults and keep her off of television, which is as bad as any. But it also makes me wonder, what is the Capitol broadcasting to everybody while 13 can't interfere? And that's the other thing about rescuing Peeta, is that they go and grab him, but there's been this period of time where they have no idea really what's going on, out there.
Yes. Yeah.
So, something else could have happened to him. I don't know. In the time that we saw him last, I don't know what other broadcast the Capitol has. Can they get the broadcast from the Capitol while they're in the bunker?
It says we receive next to no information about what's happening. Our screens never come on, and we get only brief audio updates from Coin about the nature of the bombs.
Right.
So that's all they get.
Yeah. So that's so I don't know. Like, for all I know, Peeta could have been dragged out on TV a couple of times and been told all kinds of shit,
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a thing where she's wondering, I think it's in the last chapters, where she's wondering about let me see, I might be getting my information mixed up, guys. I'm sorry. My brain has been a little bit civvy lately. What Peeta knows about 12, right? Does Peeta know 12 is completely gone?
We don't know anything about what he knows.
Right. Okay. So now I'm wondering, like, maybe they showed Peeta 12 and was like, and you know who did this? You know what I mean? Katniss and 13 killed your whole family. I mean, I don't know. They could have told him anything. So, that just occurred to me in the moment. I kind of didn't mean to interrupt you, but like that thought.
No, that's fine. Everybody is going to be a lot more interested in what you're theorizing than what I have to say at any point. So that's fine. So then we have this thing with Crazy Cat. Remember I said something about that duck thing? What was it that we were talking about? Like last week. And and you were saying something about how, like, I don't want to think about that. So let me look at this duck. Because you were like on a video and we had just been talking about fucking Palestine. And it was like such a perfect fucking.
Yes, you said remember that's going to come up later, right? I remember now.
Our space becomes very popular because both children and adults have a fascination with Buttercup. He attains celebrity status with his evening game of Crazy Cat. I created this by accident a few years ago during a winter blackout. You simply wiggle a flashlight beam around on the floor and Buttercup tries to chase it. I'm petty enough to enjoy it because I think it makes him look stupid. Inexplicably, everyone here thinks he's clever and delightful. I'm even issued a special set of batteries, an enormous waste to be used for this purpose. The citizens of 13 are truly starved for entertainment.
Listen.
Mm-hmm.
Too close to home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one really like got me. I remember on the reread just being like, wow. Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is all of us scrolling our phones looking at fucking games of Crazy Cat because the reality of our situation is just too much TM. I do too. I love how like low-key annoyed she is that everybody is so enamored with Buttercup and they don't see him for the fool that he obviously is. But
I can't help, as much as like I love cats and her attitude in person would make me annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help but love the fact that she has no time for Buttercup. Like there's something about it. I think it's just that, women characters are not allowed to be this way most of the time.
Yeah. It's like the very beginning when we find out that she like was going to, just drown this fucking cat.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, wait, I'm sorry, this is the hero? What's happening? Yeah, there's a hard edge to Katniss that I really enjoy. That's very different from what we usually get in like YA, especially with a young female protagonist. She's just allowed to be much rougher around the edges than you normally get, and I really appreciate that. There's a softening that happens with female characters often, because when women aren't soft, they're not likable, and above all, women have to be likable. The character in real life and in our fiction. If the woman is unlikable, then we're not interested in the story she's telling. And I like that there's a lot about Katniss that, like, I'm not sure I would necessarily want to be her friend,
Right. Yeah. That's the energy, is like when there's a whole other thing later that I think will speak to this in the live read. And I think that'll be kind of fun. I'm going to, just to let you know, I'm going to do the live read, but I'm going to stop intermittently and just talk about the section that I just read.
Okay.
Because I want to give us a little bit more room to talk, and just, I know I definitely agree with Cindy, I think it was, who said that, like, the talks aren't as deep when we aren't given time to, like, mull it over. And while this isn't going to be giving us a lot of mulling time, maybe breaking up the live read a little bit, because there are places where it'll be a natural stopping point, I think.
Okay. All right, cool.
So
gives a little chance to at least discuss some of the information that's coming up, as opposed to just reacting to it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm down.
So at this point, Katniss realizes the crazy cat thing.
I love this
is
so much.
A metaphor for what Snow is doing to her with Peeta. And she thinks about how when the light is out, then he like looks around wistfully, where is it? And then he just forgets about it, and he just lives and moves on. But if she leaves the light on out of reach, he obsesses over it and cannot focus and is just, unhappy.
I can't say enough how much I love this. I love the way the realization comes to her. It feels very, very natural. It feels real. It feels like, how sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with an epiphany, right? Those are, sometimes things really do just come to you out of the blue. Like,
it's true.
That's a thing that absolutely happens. But sometimes your brain works quietly in the background and makes these connections.
It really does sometimes.
That you're actively engaged in. And I love the way that this, it takes a couple of nights of her playing. It's not even the first night that she's playing. It's the third night that she's playing. And we know from the opening line of this chapter that she is being consumed by this question of what will break me. So we know that is bouncing around in her head. It's not really going away. And she's involved in this distraction that she is presenting as though it's a distraction for everybody else in 13. Right?
Yeah. Yes.
But clearly it's also working as a distraction for herself. And it's in this moment that suddenly she's making these connections. And yeah, this idea that, like, Peeta is her light, and she's obsessed with trying to catch it as long as she knows it's out there moving around and it's possibly in reach. And then but if the light goes out, which will be when Peeta is dead, I will move on. I'll recover and move on. That's what will happen if Peeta dies, which is a bummer of a thing to say, because generally we I would never recover from XYZ, right? But the reality of the way that death works in our lives is that we don't like to use the word recover. I get really like antsy around even saying things like, oh, I moved on. But we find ways to live with the new reality, and then we continue living. And then the thing where, but what if it's just existing, but I can't touch it?
Yes.
And that is what we cannot live with. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. So as she realizes this is like kind of the thing that begins to really undo her.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, the pain over my heart returns. And from it, I imagine tiny fissures spreading out into my body, through my torso, down my arms and legs, over my face, leaving it crisscrossed with cracks. One good jolt of a bunker missile, and I could shatter into strange razor sharp shards. And finally, she goes and finds Finnick, and is like, "This is what they did with Annie, huh?" And he's like, "Yep." And she remembers him trying to comfort her, being like, well, they'll keep him alive as long as they can use him. And that she misunderstood. She thought he meant as bait to lure me out, you know? And
Right.
He's like, oh, I shouldn't even have told you anything by that point, because what the fuck was going to happen? Like, it was too late.
I should have warned you before the quarter quell even started.
Yeah.
And then he starts talking about how he didn't understand what actually was going on with her and Peeta.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I just didn't understand when I first met you after your first games. And he explains that everybody basically, well, he says, I thought the whole romance was an act on your part, he says.
Yeah.
Then he's like, we all expected you to continue with the strategy, but, you know, it was just strategy. And he talks about a moment when he realized it was real after Peeta hit the force field, which we remember when that happens, and she catches Finnick looking at her just kind of like, huh.
Uh-huh.
And I think we had even talked about at the time that was Finnick being like, wait a minute. Something is real here.
Yeah.
And he says to her, I knew in that moment that I'd misjudged you, that you do love him, maybe not in a romantic way, but you care very much about him. It's clear. And he says,
I really like that when he's like, it's clear you love him. I'm not saying in what way. Like,
yep,
I just like that he
that.
Qualifies that, you know.
Agree. I do too. It's another thing that's kind of rare in especially in YA books, where there's room for different types of love, you know,
Mm-hmm,
and an acknowledgement. Like, just because I'm saying that you love him, I'm not saying, oh, you want to marry him now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he leaves space for that not to necessarily be the type of love that exists between them, but that there is love nonetheless.
Yeah.
And he says anyone could see, and that anyone really hits her, because she's like, huh, well, Snow told me that I had to convince him. And now it looks like I did in that moment with Peeta's life in limbo. I finally convinced him. And in doing so, I gave him the weapon he needed to break me.
Yeah. It's so fucked up.
It
like,
puts a whole different spin on that, right?
Right? Like, convince me. And she's like, oh, I'm going to convince the shit out of you. And he's like, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Now I know exactly what to do.
Jesus Christ, man. What?
Yeah.
Like, when we read that, when we read that scene with Snow, like, I took it exactly at face value. Like, yeah, you need to convince him so that you can save everybody's life. And it turned out to be the opposite.
Yeah. Ugh. So, eventually she says, how do you bear it? And he's like, I fucking don't.
Look at me. I'm a mess. I'm a goddamn mess.
And he says, don't give into it, because it takes 10 times as long to put yourself back together as it does to fall apart.
When he says, Finnick looked at me in disbelief, I thought to myself, this man didn't even have pants on the other day.
Oh, that's true. So he says, all right, well, we're going to go ahead and get you some rope soon so that you can join me in these little nodding sessions to
Yeah.
distract yourself. That's how we're going to try and handle this. Which is as good a method as any, I suppose.
Right? You gotta have something. And yeah, she does all night, and then by the morning, like her fingers are sore because she's just been making knots all night.
So 24 hours later, there's been no bombing. They finally leave. Their whole place that they had been staying is gone. And so they have to like stay in a different whole area. And it turns out like now Buttercup is considered important enough, I guess. So he's got a pan of sand and a food ration all for him, since they don't have a window in their little cubby hole anymore. So the president wants them to do a propo showing, hey, we're still alive. 13 is still functional. And I love this. They're giving coffee, and Finnick does this whole wanna sugar thing again. And she can't help but be like, you fucking, all right, dude. And
I love this moment. As she's heading up to get like all suited up, she catches Gale giving her and Finnick a look that she describes as an unhappy look. And she's like, okay, what the fuck is this problem now? You know, is he jealous of me and Finnick now? Did he see me go to Finnick last night? And then she's like, well, you know what? I've got rope burn on my fingers. I can barely keep my eyes open, and I got a camera crew waiting for me. So he's going to have to fucking deal.
I really did like that. Just like, the fucking, what is it? Okay, you know what? I don't care. Like, just immediately, just like, right. I have shit to do.
And the thing about this is that we don't know what Gale was thinking. Like, for all we know,
that's true.
Gale is looking at her and Finnick, and he's concerned that Katniss might, because Finnick has not been doing great. And he might be concerned that now Katniss is in a dangerous position of maybe being as sort of as having a harder time as Finnick is having. Right? Like, Gale could be looking at that and being like, oh, shit. But that's not what she thinks.
No, it is not. So there's a moment where they talk about how much did Peeta's giving them a warning actually help. And Boggs says, like, he gave us a heads up of about 10 minutes. And she's like, that helps though, right? And he's like, yeah, like 10 minutes meant people stayed alive that wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
And she's just like, yeah, again, I owe Peeta again. Jesus, I'm never going to stop owing this guy.
Yep. She thinks
she just can't help but think in that way.
How Prim and Gale barely made it to the bunker. You know, without that 10 minutes, they would have been absolutely gone. And yeah, she's once again fucking Peeta. I owe
him. So they go outside, and they're gonna film in front of the old Justice Building as kind of a joke, because that's the footage that they keep reusing to be like 13 is gone. So they're trying to make a bit of a funny here, but as they come out, everybody sort of stops and is looking around and is like, that's weird. And then she smells it and completely breaks down here. It takes a minute to really set in, but it's roses. It's pink and red.
Yep.
For a pair of lovers.
Yep. It's the same roses that were on the stage at their victory interview. And she, like you said, freaks out. She starts telling everybody to, like, don't touch them, as if they've been weaponized in some way. And it turns out that they're basically just flowers.
Yes, they're completely harmless, except for that they are not.
But they do exactly what they are intended to do, which is just send her off the rails. And she tries to, like, also, she's having this weird reaction to, I'm assuming, I kept waiting for a reveal that the coffee wasn't just coffee, because she has such a jittery response to it. But it is mentioned that she never really liked coffee. She never really drank it, and she's been up all night. So she's like fucking wired off of this coffee that she has.
Yeah.
And then with everything else going on, she's a mess. She's a fucking mess.
Yeah.
She's sweating. She's jittery. She can't hold still. She can't catch a breath. And they're trying to film this propo, and she just is not doing a good job. She can't come up with anything. So then they're like, all right, well, let's do a Q&A. And they give her a line to say, and she can't even get the line out.
13 is alive and well, and so am I. And she can't say it.
Nope.
It's really awful. Try the line again. 13's alive and so... No, that's wrong. Katniss, just this one line, and you're done today, I promise. 13's alive and well, and so am I. I swing my arms to loosen myself up, place my fists on my hips, then drop them to my sides. Saliva's filling my mouth at a ridiculous rate, and I feel vomit at the back of my throat. I swallow hard and open my lips so I can get the stupid line out and go hide in the woods, and that's when I start crying. And Plutarch says, what's wrong with her? And Finnick says she's figured out how Snow's using Peeta, and everybody just exhales because they all knew.
Yep.
They knew, and they just were hoping it wouldn't catch up, that she wouldn't get there.
Yep.
And that's so grim.
I love this. It's because I know this now, there will never be a way for me not to know this again. Yeah. Like, that's a fucking bar. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is just, it is. Whew. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they come and try to hold her and embrace her. And the only person that she wants comfort from is Haymitch, because he loves Peeta too. And she reaches out for him, and he holds her and he says, it'll be okay. And lets her sob. And she says, I can't do this anymore. And he says, I know. Yeah, it's bad. It's real bad. It's my fault. Did you see how weird he acted? You know, what are they doing to him? Because of me, because I'm the Mockingjay. And then it just says, I crossed some line into hysteria, and there's a needle in my arm, and the world slips away. Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, guys. Yeah. Not great.
So when she wakes up, there's Haymitch, and he's telling her they're sending in a rescue team. And she's like, okay, why now? The fuck? Why didn't they do that before? And he's like, well, because it's going to fucking cost us. People are going to die. Folks who have covers, their covers are going to be blown, and we're going to just lose them as a source of information. Like, there's good reasons. It's not that we just didn't give a shit.
Right.
But we have reached a point where it's clear we've got to, if we want to keep you going.
Yep. And they're going to get Peeta, and they're going to get Annie out for Finnick, he says. And she's like, well, where is Finnick? And he's in the other fucking cot sleeping off his sedative because he lost his shit right after she lost her shit.
Something about that really...
Haymitch says,
that just, yeah.
It was a really excellent shoot. You two cracked up, and Boggs left to arrange the mission to get Peeta. We're officially in rerun. Fucking Haymitch.
And she's like, so who's going to do the thing? And he's like, well, 7 people volunteered. Yeah. She's like, yeah? Who? Well, I did, but he pretended not to see me. Haymitch, who's going? And he's like, who's going?
Who stepped up first?
It was Gale.
Of course,
and she's just like, well, I'm going. And he's like, LOL, the fuck you are. Ma'am, you just broke down trying to deliver a single line. Yeah, we're not sending you into the fucking Capitol. Mm-hmm. He doesn't say it like that, but that's clearly what's happening. Like, we do not think you can handle it.
Yeah, and he's like, I'll fucking sedate you until it's over if you don't calm your ass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's trying to be like, oh, I'll catch up. And he's like, yeah, okay, sure. No, stop it. Just, you have to face the facts of the situation.
Yeah. And she's desperate. I have to do something. Like, I can't just sit here. You got to give me something to do. And Haymitch is like, all right, well, let me talk to Plutarch and see what we can come up with. And she can't even sit still. And she goes and wakes up Finnick.
And Finnick is just like, well, by the end of the day, it's either going to be done and they'll be dead or alive, which is a decisive thing, which is really a solution, even if it doesn't feel like one.
It's more
like,
than
this is the best
hope for.
Yeah, this is the best case scenario, actually, considering all the what we're dealing with here.
A wild take, but he's not actually wrong.
No,
but
not even a little wrong.
It's a really stark thing to say, you know? Again, saying things that normally we don't think are appropriate to say when you're dealing with, like, life and death, right? Like, you're not supposed to say, well, they'll be dead and it'll be over. Like, that's not generally considered an acceptable thing to say, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But he's not completely wrong here. She says, that's a sunny view of our situation. But then she also acknowledges, and yet there's something calming about the idea that this torment could come to an end.
Yeah. Take it out of their hands, finally.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, when they're like, okay, but we have to be able to do something, Plutarch is like, well, it's actually Haymitch that comes in, and he's like, we need something really distracting to put on TV. And she's sort of like, what am I going to say? Because all I've done so far is make outbursts, which take 2 seconds. And we need some things that we can sustain over some time to keep this distraction going. And maybe if Snow and his people are completely focused on this, it'll be easier to do this extraction.
Right. So she decides to, like, finally be vulnerable. In a way that she never was able to pull off during the games or any of the other interviews, pre or post interviews. And she tells the story of first meeting Peeta and, you know, talks about all that. And it seems like it's going well as far as, like, you know, her interview. And then she ends with a very, like, line, a very defiant line directed to Snow that, once he had told her that the Capitol was fragile and she didn't understand what he meant at the time. But now she understands it's fragile because the Capitol depends on the districts for everything that they have.
Yeah.
And that if we declare our freedom, the Capitol will collapse. And she says, President Snow, thanks to you, I'm officially declaring mine today. And then her estimation of her performance is that she's been sufficient, if not dazzling. But it's my message to to President Snow that's got the wheel spinning in Plutarch's brain. And then he calls Finnick over and they have a little bit of a powwow off to the side. And she can't really hear what they're talking about. But when they come back, Finnick is taking the seat in front of the camera. And Haymitch says, you don't have to do this. And Finnick says, yes, I do. If it'll help her, I'm ready. And then my jaw hit the fucking floor.
So do you see why I had a really hard time deciding between 12 and 13 for a live read? Because this is a big info drop.
This is big. But it is like everything that about Finnick Odair that I took anyway. It's funny too because Katniss had the same exact thought that I had, which was basically like, I'm so angry I misjudged him. And this whole time, like every bad thing I ever thought about him, I feel like an asshole now.
Yeah. I mean, of course you interpreted him a certain way. Like, of course you did. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I remember first reading this and just being like, really? This guy? Come on. And then you get to this point and I was like, how did I not know already?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know about the Capitol. I should have realized this is
Right.
how it would work. Come
It's
on.
so funny though, because the way it's like there was a line talking about Enobaria where it was something like, I bet she's got no shortage of suitors and admirers in the Capitol. But it's presented
Mhm.
in this way that it's like, oh, the victors are just lounging and getting all of these things, these tokens of appreciation thrown at them, you know?
Exactly.
And it never occurred to me that they would be expected to do anything in return. Like, in my mind, they did what they had to do, which was win the game. Now, everything else is just like bonus.
One would think.
One would fucking think. Like, the more I learn about what life is like for the victors after the games, like, is it better to just not get out of the games? Is it better to just fucking perish?
Honestly, I think so. I really do. Like, it really seems as if the way that, I mean, even if you win, like there's, if you win the wrong way,
Mm-hmm.
then God knows, you know? It's just, there's very few upsides except for that your community gets food, which even with Katniss, they make sure
Yep.
it's all rotten. So, you
Yep.
know,
Like, I was thinking Peeta and Katniss winning went so poorly because of the way they won with the berries, right? And I was
Mhm.
thinking it was really like a one-off, you know? But then finding out about what happened, and Haymitch won in a weird way, so he had to be punished because of the way he used the force field. I don't know what the fuck Finnick did to deserve this treatment. I can't remember how he won, but
I think it's just that he's beautiful.
like, oh my God. It just, and then when you're reminded that the winners are paraded around as though this is some aspirational thing. Like, if you're
Mhm.
lucky, you can win and then all your problems are solved, and you're not allowed to ever tell anybody, because then you ruin the illusion. So you can't be like, no, this is really what it's like to win. It fucking sucks. Like, there's no opportunity to say that out loud to anybody. It's a fucking horror show.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm just going to read tales of strange sexual appetites, betrayals of the heart, bottomless greed, bloody power plays, drunken secrets whispered over damp pillowcases in the dead of night. Finnick was someone bought and sold, a district slave. A handsome one, certainly, but in reality harmless. Who would he tell? And who would believe him if he did? But some secrets are too delicious not to share. I don't know the people Finnick names. All seem to be prominent capital citizens. But I know from listening to the chatter of my prep team, the attention the most mild slip in judgment can draw. If a bad haircut can lead to hours of gossip, what will charges of incest, backstabbing, blackmail, and arson produce? Even as the waves of shock and recrimination roll over the Capitol, the people there will be waiting, as I am now, to hear about the president. And he says that the way he got where he got, as young as he was at the time, was poison. His allies, who had the potential to become threats or actual adversaries, like, there were all these mysterious deaths. And he mentioned this is why there's a smell of blood on his breath. He has built up a tolerance and he has antidotes, but they don't actually always work. So he has sores in his mouth that are always bleeding.
Jesus Christ. This is not what I was expecting, I don't think.
Yeah.
Why does he always smell like blood, you asked me? And I think I made a joke about being a vampire, which
in a manner of speaking.
In a manner of speaking, he kind of is. But yeah, this is, and that he's got This is also why he wears the perfume roses to try to hide that smell. And that he has a list currently, and no one knows who's going to be next.
Yeah.
Which has got to send the Capitol into a fucking spin, right?
A tizzy.
A tizzy.
I think that's the word, is a tizzy these days. That's what all the kids are saying.
Is that what the kids are saying?
They're like, you got the Riz, tizzy. That's how it goes.
I almost made the same joke.
Oh, we're old.
We are. It's bad.
So she says, like, you know, I figure a lot of this already. Like, he doesn't shock me, but clearly the people around us listening, some of the folks who are from the Capitol are shocked. Mm-hmm. Like, even Plutarch has a couple of reactions to what he says, and she's just like, "Oh, word, okay." Like, interesting.
I love this bit when Finnick is done. The cameras just keep rolling because everybody is shocked, and Finnick has to be like, "Cut."
Yep. So, yeah, this revelation, I just really enjoy it because, like you said, you really start off feeling like you've got Finnick's number. Mm-hmm. You think you know. And it's so incredible how she sets it up for us to believe everything that all the, the fucking rubes out there are meant to believe. Mm-hmm. Us as readers, we don't even question it, really. You know, we just accept, oh yeah, he's a celebrity. And so now he's out here just playing the field like, you know, George Clooney because he's hot and rich and won. And we've been shown so many times that's like not how this really works. But we keep thinking that our people are like the exception and that everybody else got these lives of leisure afterward. Yep. And our people are the only ones being targeted. And you just like, you need these reminders. That is not an exception at all. Like, this is the fucking way it works. Yeah. And when Finnick starts to talk, one of the first things he says is he's just like, President Snow used to sell me. Well, my body, that is. And I wasn't the only one. If a victor is considered desirable, the president gives them away as a reward or allows people to buy them for an exorbitant amount of money. And if you refuse, he kills someone you love, so you do it. And that is, I mean, it's a hell of a way to start your fucking interview. Right. But it is so deeply upsetting. And then there's also this idea of like, he sells you for money, but it doesn't say that you get the money. Right. Oh, right? No. Yeah. That's the other thing too. Right. And so after this is over and they leave and she's with Haymitch, Katniss starts to wonder, like, is that what would have happened to me? Like, people probably would have paid a really good price to get the girl on fire. Which, fuck. And then she asks Haymitch, is that what happened to you? And he says, no, my mother and younger brother and my girl, they were all dead within 2 weeks after I was crowned victor because of the stunt with the force field. So Snow never actually had anybody to use against me because he just fucking came right out and killed them. And which is like, again, how did we not think about what happened to Haymitch after he used the force field and made them look stupid? He did the exact same thing, made them look like, and did we ever stop and ask? Nope. I wonder if he got punished for that. And no, like, it's embarrassing. I'm embarrassed. Yeah. I mean, and I know that we had conversations about like, well, something must have happened, you know, but then it was like, I think I really leaned into what Katniss was saying when she was just like, well, years of having tributes that didn't stand a chance probably drove him to drink, you know? Yeah. As opposed to, no, what the Capitol did to him drove him to drink. Yeah. And now that the two of them, like, he had a relationship with them, there was a weapon now for Snow to use against him again because he gave a shit.
Yep.
When he hadn't for such a long time.
And she says that, and she says, I don't even get a shrug in return. Yeah. So now they just have like nothing to do but wait until, it's time. And then her and Finnick sit around and play with their knots. And then they get pulled down to, I forget what room it's called, but with Beetee, and watch him let it go, he says.
Yeah. So let's see. Beetee takes us to another room and shows us how the team, with the help of rebel insiders, has attempted to free the victors from an underground prison. It seems to have involved knockout gas distributed by the ventilation system, a power failure, the detonation of a bomb in a government building several miles from the prison, and now the disruption of the broadcast. Beetee's glad we find the plan hard to follow, because then our enemies will too. And I was like, I guess? And she's like, okay, like your electricity trap. And he's like, yeah, see how well that worked out? Well,
I could not
really,
tell. Like,
he's
making a joke, right?
Right? It felt like it had to be
a joke.
I don't think he was, though. I really don't.
The way she responds tells me that he wasn't.
Yeah.
But I refuse.
So she again goes back to making knots, just trying to distract themselves. And she asks Finnick about Annie to pass the time. And is like, so did you love her right away? And he says, no, she crept up on me. And that's all we get of that convo. But I do like it.
I did too. I wanted to hear a little bit more about that, but it just transitions to her thinking about the only person creeping up on her is Snow. Mm-hmm. And then like more time passes, and then finally Hamish comes in and is like, they're back. They want us in the hospital. And before she can even ask a question, he's like, that's all I know.
So then they get notified that they're back. And you guys need to come to the hospital. That's all they've told me. And she comes in time to see Joanna Mason getting wheeled by. And she has like scabs and bruises all over her. Her head's been shaved and she is super thin. She sees Gale, and he's been injured in there with like extracting something from under his shoulder blade. So he's okay, but he's wounded. And then we have the moment with Finnick and Annie. And she just shrieks his name, and then they're grasping each other. Suddenly, it's as if there's no one in the world but these two, crashing through space to reach each other. They collide, enfold, lose their balance, and slam against a wall where they stay, clinging into one being, indivisible.
I love that.
Same. So they mention how Anabaria, they didn't get her out, but they actually don't think she's likely to be being held since she's from 2. And Peeta's at the end of the hall. The effects of the gas are just wearing off. You should be there when he wakes. And so we have her going in to see him, and he gives her this weird look that she can't really read. And then his fingers lock around her throat. And that is where the chapter ends.
Yeah, she runs to meet him, almost like mimicking what Finnick and Annie had, right? She's running to him with her arms open to give him this giant hug, and his hands are reaching for her. She thinks to caress her face, and then she's just about to say his name, and then, fingers lock around her throat.
I didn't even think of it as, like, maybe mimicking. I don't mean mimicking, like, I'm just trying to copy. Like, she just said that she felt an envy, and I think you're right. Like, she has him back and is just instinctually being like, nobody could doubt how they felt about each other, and sort of maybe trying to have that also. I didn't
I think
think
it was.
about that.
I think
But...
it's sincere on her part, though. Like
oh
you
yeah,
said,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really considered it in that light. All right. You ready?
I don't think so, but let's go.
You gonna put your book away and just
Yeah, I will. I will.
okay. The cold collar chafes my neck and makes the shivering even harder to control. At least I'm no longer in the claustrophobic tube while the machines click and whir around me, listening to a disembodied voice telling me to hold still while I try to convince myself I can still breathe. Even now, when I've been assured there will be no permanent damage, I hunger for air. The medical team's main concerns, damage to my spinal cord, airway, veins, and arteries, have been allayed. Bruises, hoarseness, sore larynx, this strange little cough. Nothing to be worried about. It will all be fine. The Mockingjay will not lose her voice. Where, I want to ask, is the doctor who determines if I am losing my mind? Only, I'm not supposed to talk right now. I can't even thank Boggs when he comes to check on me, to look me over and tell me he's seen a lot worse injuries among the soldiers when they teach chokeholds in training. It was Boggs who knocked out Peeta with one blow before any permanent damage could be done. I know Haymitch would have come to my defense if he hadn't been utterly unprepared. To catch both Haymitch and myself off guard is a rare thing. But we have been so consumed with saving Peeta, so tortured by having him in the Capitol's hands, that the elation at having him back blinded us. If I'd had a private reunion with Peeta, he would have killed me. Now that he's deranged. No, not deranged, I remind myself. Hijacked. That's the word I heard pass between Plutarch and Haymitch as I was wheeled past them in the hallway. Hijacked. I don't know what it means. Prim, who appeared moments after the attack and has stayed as close to me as possible ever since, spreads another blanket over me. I think they'll take the collar off soon, Katniss. You won't be so cold then. My mother, who's been assisting in a complicated surgery, has still not been informed of Peeta's assault. Prim takes one of my hands, which is clutched in a fist, and massages it until it opens and blood begins to flow through my fingers again. She's starting on the second fist when the doctors show up, remove the collar, and give me a shot of something for pain and swelling. I lie as instructed with my head still, not aggravating the injuries to my neck. Plutarch, Haymitch, and Beatty have been waiting in the hall for the doctors to give them clearance to see me. I don't know if they've told Gale, but since he's not here, I assume they haven't. Plutarch ushers the doctors out and tries to order Prim to go as well, but she says, "No. If you force me to leave, I'll go directly to surgery and tell my mother everything that's happened. And I warn you, she doesn't think much of a game maker calling the shots on Katniss' life, especially when you've taken such poor care of her."
Okay, Prim.
Right? Oh, I love her so much. Plutarch looks offended, but Haymitch chuckles. I'd let it go, Plutarch, he says. Prim stays. "So, Katniss, Peeta's condition has come as a shock to all of us," says Plutarch. "We couldn't help but notice his deterioration in the last 2 interviews. Obviously, he's been abused, and we put his psychological state down to that. Now, we believe something more was going on, that the Capitol has been subjecting him to a rather uncommon technique known as hijacking. Beatty?" "I'm sorry," Beatty says, "but I can't tell you all the specifics of it, Katniss. The Capitol's very secretive about this form of torture, and I believe the results are inconsistent. This we do know. It's a type of fear conditioning. The term hijack comes from an Old English word that means to capture, or even better, seize. We believe it was chosen because the technique involves the use of tracker-jacker venom, and the jack suggested hijack. You were stung in your first Hunger Games, so unlike most of us, you have first-hand knowledge of the effects of the venom. Terror, hallucinations, nightmarish visions of losing those I love because the venom targets the part of the brain that houses fear. I'm sure you remember how frightening it was. Did you also suffer mental confusion in the aftermath? Asks Beatty. A sense of being unable to judge what was true and what was false? Most people who have been stung and live to tell about it report something of the kind. Yes, that encounter with Peeta, even after I was clear-headed, I wasn't sure if he had saved my life by taking on Cato or if I'd imagined it. Recall is made more difficult because memories can be changed. Beatty taps his forehead. Brought to the forefront of your mind, altered, and saved again in the revised form. Now imagine that I ask you to remember something, either with a verbal suggestion or by making you watch a tape of the event, and while that experience is refreshed, I give you a dose of Tracker Jacker venom. Not enough to induce a 3-day blackout, just enough to infuse the memory with fear and doubt. And that's what your brain puts in long-term storage.
Oh
I start to feel sick. Prim asks the question that's in my mind. Is that what they've done to Peeta? Taken his memories of Katniss and distorted them so they're scary? Beatty nods. So scary that he'd see her as life-threatening. That he might try to kill her. Yes, that's our current theory.
Oh my God, oh God.
I cover my face with my arms because this isn't happening. It isn't possible. For someone to make Peeta forget he loves me? No one could do that. But you can reverse it, right? Asks Prim. Very little data on that, says Plutarch. None, really. If hijacking rehabilitation has been attempted before, we have no access to those records. Well, you're going to try, aren't you? Prim persists. You're not just going to lock him up in some padded room and leave him to suffer. Of course we'll try, Prim, says Beatty. It's just we don't know to what degree we'll succeed, if any. My guess is that fearful events are the hardest to root out. They're the ones we naturally remember the best, after all. And apart from his memories of Katniss, we don't yet know what else has been tampered with, says Plutarch. We're putting together a team of mental health and military professionals to come up with a counterattack. I, personally, feel optimistic he'll make a full recovery. Do you? Asks Prim caustically. And what do you think, Haymitch? I shift my arms slightly so I can see his expression through the crack. He's exhausted and discouraged as he admits, I think Peeta might get somewhat better, but I don't think he'll ever be the same. I snap my arms back together, closing the crack, shutting them all out. At least he's alive, says Plutarch, as if he's losing patience with the lot of us. Snow executed Peeta's stylist and his prep team on live television tonight. We've no idea what happened to Effie Trinket. Peeta's damaged, but he's here, with us, and that's a definite improvement over his situation 12 hours ago. Let's keep that in mind, all right? Plutarch's attempt to cheer me up, laced with the news of another 4, possibly 5 murders, somehow backfires. Portia, Peeta's prep team, Effie. The effort to fight back tears makes my throat throb until I'm gasping again. Eventually, they have no choice but to sedate me. Jesus. When I wake, I wonder if this will be the only way I sleep now, with drugs shot into my arm. I'm glad I'm not supposed to talk for the next few days because there's nothing I want to say or do. In fact, I'm a model patient, my lethargy taken for restraint, obedience to the doctor's orders. I no longer feel like crying. In fact, I can only manage to hold on to one simple thought. An image of Snow's face, accompanied by the whisper in my head, I will kill you. So let's pause here.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So they have done something that I could not have even begun to imagine.
Mm-hmm.
They have altered him mentally using, we think, this venom, this sort of like psychedelic, basically.
Yeah.
Which, there are, examples in real time, in real life, of using different like psychedelics to try to, create, well, I don't know how much of this is real, but to create soldiers, to recondition, people. I feel like Clockwork Orange came up recently on, I don't know if it was Hunger Games or not. Maybe it was something else. But there's a whole thing there where they use chemicals and imagery to try to rewire someone's brain so that they have and that what they do is they make your experience of violence so unpleasant that the thought of being committing an act of violence, like you physically can't do it, right? That's what they do in that book. Like they take these hooligans and can recondition them so that their whole way that they interact with the world is changed. But that didn't occur to me as something that we would be getting here, because I thought the story was terrible enough as it was.
Yeah, that's really it, isn't it? It's just like, oh, I didn't. Oh, okay.
So, and that they would center this reconditioning around Katniss specifically, right? Mm-hmm. So that she becomes a monster in his eyes, in his mind, is just so inhumane that it, I'm coming up short with how to describe it.
Yeah.
It is so monstrous. Her line that what did she say?
They've made him forget that he loves me.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
Yep.
Like, I didn't even know that was on the table.
Yeah, that's the thing that always gets me, is just how I hesitate to use the words take it for granted, because that implies a sort of like malice almost, but you do take for granted just how much he loves her. It's a constant from the beginning. Mm-hmm. The idea of that being something that can be taken away,
right,
is impossible,
And then the idea too, like not even like pulling back just from focusing on his relationship with her, but one of the recurring things with Peeta is simply just like how good he is, and his ability to see the potential good in other people. And now where he looks, he just sees monsters everywhere.
Yeah,
like they have taken all of the things that we said before about how Peeta would be better for the rebellion, right? How he has a way of connecting with people that can't be denied. That's why he was so good in all the interviews and all that shit, right? Like they have stolen all of that from him.
Yeah.
My God, it is Jesus fucking Christ. And what's funny too? It's not funny, haha, but how we do this to ourselves and to each other in real time without like any fancy drugs, like how we, based on the type of media we consume, we can like, all right, I'm going to make a very labored analogy here. Y'all have to forgive me. But how people talk about how like Fox News ruined their parents?
Yes.
Like my parents weren't like this before. And then, a steady diet of Fox News has completely changed them. And everywhere they look, they see enemies now, and they see monsters, and they see people out to get them. They completely changed their brain. We do that to each other, and powers that be do it to us.
Yeah.
It's not as drastic as this, but it's it's in the realm, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and you take someone who used to be a different type of person, and then you poison them, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And they turn into a completely different person. It's not that far fetched. I mean, it's extreme because, you know, it's fiction and, you know, we're playing in extremes, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. It is not as far removed from our reality as maybe we'd like to think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Jesus Christ. I just wanted him to be a little shell-shocked. I didn't know we were getting all this. My
all
God.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's right. You still got to read some more. Sorry.
No, that's okay. My mother and Prim take turns nursing me, coaxing me to swallow bites of soft food. People come in periodically to give me updates on Peeta's condition. The high levels of Tracker Jacker venom are working their way out of his body. He's being treated only by strangers, natives of 13. No one from home or the capital has been allowed to see him, to keep any dangerous memories from triggering. A team of specialists works long hours designing a strategy for his recovery. Gale's not supposed to visit me, as he's confined to bed with some kind of shoulder wound, but on the third night, after I've been medicated and the lights turned down low for bedtime, he slips silently into my room. He doesn't speak, just runs his fingers over the bruises on my neck with a touch as light as a moth's wings, plants a kiss between my eyes, and disappears. The next morning, I'm discharged from the hospital with instructions to move quietly and speak only when necessary. I'm not imprinted with a schedule, so I wander around aimlessly until Prim's excused from her hospital duties to take me to our family's latest compartment, 2212, identical to the last one, but with no windows. Buttercup has now been issued a daily food allowance and a pan of sand that's kept under the bathroom sink. I said this earlier.
That's what you were talking about. I had no idea what you were talking about. I was like, did I miss something?
I straight up thought that was in the previous chapter, but oh well, minor spoiler. As Prim tucks me into bed, he hops up on my pillow, vying for her attention. She cradles him, but stays focused on me. Katniss, I know this thing with Peeta is terrible for you, but remember, Snow worked on him for weeks, and we've only had him for a few days. There's a chance that the old Peeta, the one who loves you, is still inside, trying to get back to you. Don't give up on him. I look at my little sister and think how she has inherited the best qualities our family has to offer. My mother's healing hands, my father's level head, and my fight. There's something else there as well, something entirely her own. An ability to look into the confusing mess of life and see things for what they are. Is it possible she could be right, that Peeta could return to me? I have to get back to the hospital, Prim says, placing Buttercup on the bed beside me. You two keep each other company, okay? Buttercup springs off the bed and follows her to the door, complaining loudly when he's left behind. We're about as much company for each other as dirt. After maybe 30 seconds, I know I can't stand being confined in the subterranean cell and leave Buttercup to his own devices. I get lost several times, but eventually I make my way down to special defense. Everyone I pass stares at the bruises, and I can't help feeling self-conscious to the point that I tug my collar up to my ears. Gale must have been released from the hospital this morning as well, because I find him in one of the research rooms with Beatty. They're immersed, heads bent over a drawing, talking measurements. Versions of the picture litter the table and floor, tacked on the corkboard walls. Occupying several computer screens are other designs of some sort. In the rough lines of one, I recognize Gale's twitch-up snare. What are these? I ask hoarsely, pulling their attention from the sheet. Ah, Katniss, you found us out, says Beatty cheerfully. What, is this a secret? I know Gale's been down here working with Beatty a lot, but I assumed they were messing around with bows and guns. Not really, but I felt a little guilty about it, stealing Gale away from you so much, Beatty admits. Since I've spent most of my time in 13 disoriented, worried, angry, being remade or hospitalized, I can't say Gale's absences have inconvenienced me. Things haven't been exactly harmonious between us either. But I let Beatty think he owes me. I hope you've been putting his time to good use. Come and see, he says, waving me over to a computer screen. This is what they've been doing. Taking the fundamental ideas behind Gale's traps and adapting them into weapons against humans. Bombs, mostly. It's less about the mechanics of the traps than the psychology behind them. Booby-trapping an area that provides something essential to survival, a water or food supply, frightening prey so that a large number flee into greater destruction, endangering offspring in order to draw in the actual desired target, the parent, luring the victim into what appears to be a safe haven where death awaits it. At some point, Gale and Beatty left the wilderness behind and focused on more human impulses, like compassion. A bomb explodes. Time is allowed for people to rush to the aid of the wounded. Then a second, more powerful bomb kills them as well.
Jesus.
That seems to be crossing some kind of line, I say. So, anything goes? They both stare at me. Beatty with doubt, Gale with hostility. I guess there isn't a rule book for what might be unacceptable to do to another human being. Sure there is. Beatty and I have been following the same rule book President Snow used when he hijacked Peeta, says Gale. Cruel, but to the point. I leave without further comment. I feel if I don't get outside immediately, I'm just going to go ballistic. But I'm still in special defense when I'm waylaid by Haymitch. Come on, he says. We need you back up at the hospital. What for? I ask. They're going to try something on Peeta, he answers. Send in the most innocuous person from 12 they can come up with. Find someone Peeta might share childhood memories with, but nothing too close to you. They're screening people now. I know this will be a difficult task, since anyone Peeta shares childhood memories with would most likely be from town, and almost none of those people escaped the flames. But when we reach the hospital room that has been turned into a workspace for Peeta's recovery team, there she sits chatting with Plutarch. Deli Cartwright. As always, she gives me a smile that suggests I'm her best friend in the world. She gives this smile to everyone. Katniss, she calls out. Hey, Deli, I say. I'd heard she and her younger brother had survived. Her parents, who ran the shoe shop in town, weren't as lucky. She looks older, wearing the drab 13 clothes that flatter no one, with her long yellow hair in a practical braid instead of curls. Deli's a bit thinner than I remember, but she was one of the few kids in District 12 with a couple of pounds to spare. The diet here, the stress, the grief of losing her parents have all no doubt contributed. How are you doing? I ask. Oh, it's been a lot of change all at once. Her eyes fill with tears. But everyone's really nice in 13, don't you think? Deli means it. She genuinely likes people. All people. Not just a few select that she's spent years making her mind up about.
I'm sorry, that's really funny.
I appreciate that you laugh at that because that line catches me every time. I just felt so seen by that. They've made an effort to make us feel welcome, I say. I think that's a fair statement without going overboard. Are you the one they've picked to see Peeta? I guess so. Poor Peeta. Poor you. I'll never understand the capital, she says. Better not to, maybe, I tell her. Deli's known Peeta for a long time, says Plutarch. Oh, yes. Deli's face brightens. We played together from when we were little. I used to tell people he was my brother. What do you think? Haymitch asks me, Anything that might trigger memories of you? We were all in the same class, but we never overlapped much, I say. Katniss was always so amazing. I never dreamed she would notice me, says Deli. The way she could hunt and go in the hob and everything. Everyone admired her so. Haymitch and I both have to take a hard look at her face to double check if she's joking. To hear Deli describe it, I had next to no friends because I intimidated people by being so exceptional. Not true. I had next to no friends because I wasn't friendly. Leave it to Deli to spin me into something wonderful.
Fucking Katniss. Oh, boy.
Deli always thinks the best of everyone, I explain. I don't think Peeta could have bad memories associated with her. Then I remember. Wait, in the Capitol, when I lied about recognizing the Avox girl, Peeta covered for me and said she looked like Deli. I remember, says Haymitch, but I don't know. It wasn't true. Deli wasn't actually there. I don't think it can compete with years of childhood memories. Especially with such a pleasant companion as Deli, says Plutarch. Let's give it a shot. Plutarch, Haymitch, and I go to the observation room next to where Peeta is confined. It's crowded with 10 members of his recovery team armed with pens and clipboards. The one-way glass and audio setup allow us to watch Peeta secretly. He lies on the bed, his arms strapped down. He doesn't fight the restraints, but his hands fidget continuously. His expression seems more lucid than when he tried to strangle me, but it's still not one that belongs to him. When the door quietly opens, his eyes widen in alarm, then become confused. Deli crosses the room tentatively, but as she nears him, she naturally breaks into a smile. Peeta, it's Deli from home. Deli? Some of the clouds seem to clear. Deli, it's you. Yes, she says with obvious relief. How do you feel? Awful. Where are we? What's happened? Asks Peeta. Here we go, says Haymitch. I told her to steer clear of any mention of Katniss or the Capitol, says Plutarch. Just see how much of home she could conjure up. Well, we're in District 13. We live here now, says Deli. That's what those people have been saying, but it makes no sense. Why aren't we home? Asks Peeta. Deli bites her lip. There was an accident. I miss home badly, too. I was only just thinking about those chalk drawings we used to do on the paving stones. Yours were so wonderful. Remember when you made each one a different animal? Yeah, pigs and cats and things, says Peeta. You said about an accident? I can see the sheen of sweat on Deli's forehead as she tries to work around the question. It was bad. No one could stay, she says haltingly. Hang in there, girl, says Haymitch. But I know you're going to like it here, Peeta. The people have been really nice to us. There's always food and clean clothes, and school's much more interesting, says Deli. Why hasn't my family come to see me? Peeta asks. They can't? Deli's tearing up again. A lot of people didn't get out of 12, so we'll need to make a new life here. I'm sure they could use a good baker. Do you remember when your father used to let us make doughboys and girls? There was a fire, Peeta says suddenly. Yes, she whispers. 12 burned down, didn't it? Because of her, says Peeta angrily. Because of Katniss. He begins to pull on the restraints. Oh, no, Peeta, it wasn't her fault, says Deli. Did she tell you that? He hisses at her. Get her out of there, says Plutarch. The door opens immediately, and Deli begins to back toward it slowly. She didn't have to. Deli begins. Because she's lying. She's a liar. You can't believe anything she says. She's some kind of mutt the Capitol created to use against the rest of us, Peeta shouts. No, Peeta, she's not. Deli tries again. Don't trust her, Deli, says Peeta in a frantic voice. I did, and she tried to kill me. She killed my friends, my family. Don't ever go near her. She's a mutt. A hand reaches through the doorway, pulls Deli out, and the door swings shut. But Peeta keeps yelling, a mutt! She's a stinking mutt! Not only does he hate me and want to kill me, he no longer believes I'm human. It was less painful being strangled. Around me, the recovery team members scribble like crazy, taking down every word. Haymitch and Plutarch grab my arms and propel me out of the room. They lean me up against a wall in the silent hallway, but I know Peeta continues to scream behind the door and the glass. Prim was wrong. Peeta is irretrievable. I can't stay here anymore, I say numbly. If you want me to be the Mockingjay, you'll have to send me away. Where do you want to go? Asks Haymitch. The Capitol? It's the only place I can think of where I have a job to do. Can't do it, Plutarch says. Not until all the districts are secure. Good news is the fighting's almost over in all of them but 2. It's a tough nut to crack, though. That's right. First the districts, next the Capitol, and then I hunt down Snow. Fine, I say. Send me to 2.
Jesus Christ. He doesn't even think she's her anymore. So in his mind, he's not even hating the real Katniss because the real Katniss is gone.
I don't think he thinks the real Katniss ever existed at this point.
Oh my God. That's even more upsetting.
Yeah. I kind of think that he's been told, like,
she was a
you
plant from the
fell
start.
for her and she wasn't real. Yeah.
She killed my friends. My family. Don't go near her. She's a mutt. So he thinks that she's responsible for 12.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of sort of guessed that, but I didn't think it in this way. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I thought maybe they just, had been lying to him, but not like altering his brain. But Jesus Christ.
And it's interesting that, like, the Capitol evidently is taking credit for Katniss. Like, they convinced Peeta, we made her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that I think is, like, I mean, I really wonder what they were able to do to really convince him of that.
Well, that brings me, that is a question for me, because if the Capitol is taking credit for Katniss and she was always their agent, then what do they think? How do they explain to him that she's in league with 13 now?
I think that him saying, like, this war is going to lead to the end of civilization. Like, he believes that she's working with 13 on behalf of the Capitol still. Like, they are being duped by her and don't know it.
Gotcha. So he's
That's my assumption.
He
I'm not sure how much real logic plays in. That's the thing,
Yeah, he might not even be asking those kind of questions because his brain is so fucking twisted.
Yeah.
It might not even occur to him that doesn't really make sense. But because then he says something here about the Capitol created to use her against the rest of us. So I'm assuming the us is like them in 12, but also everybody in the districts. Like if Peeta's still identifying as being someone from the districts who's maybe, like, in theory against the Capitol. And to your point, she's being used by the Capitol to expedite this destruction. Jesus Christ. This is, I didn't expect a rescue mission for Peeta at this point in the book. and so I probably should have known it was going to go horrible. Like that they weren't just going to bring him and he was going to be fine, you know. But it happened so fast. Like, you know, one chapter we're going to rescue him, and the next chapter he's here.
Yeah.
Jesus fucking Christ. I think
too that like we're hoping that at this point something good will happen. We've been put through it, and maybe we're going to get a break for a second, and we'll have a good thing, even though we're still in war and things are terrible. You know,
no good things.
Nah.
Her saying that she can't be here anymore, I 100% get that.
Yeah.
I am curious if they're really going to let her go out into the districts. I mean, she's not in great shape, but, I mean, she offers to go to 2, and he does acknowledge that 2 has been a tough nut to crack. So maybe they're desperate enough to give her the okay to go there. But yeah, I get it. I wouldn't fucking want to be down there anymore either. I mean, with everything that's going on, and now Peeta being there and being, this is just so horrific. I know I keep saying variations of the word horror, but I mean, I can't help myself. It just is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just the fact that I had never considered this a possibility that he could. I was sort of wondering when I first read this, the very first time I remember, thinking that maybe they had rescued a fake, that they made somebody look like Peeta to rescue and then kill Katniss. Like this person was surgically altered to look like him with plastic surgery, you know?
Right.
And that they still had Peeta actually. And that was sort of like a nice idea because Peeta's still somewhere caring about her.
Right.
Finding out that it's like, it is Peeta, because talking to him about his memories and stuff, there's no suggestion even that this isn't the real Peeta by any of them. But I still kind of wondered, like, well, maybe they don't know what the Capitol's capable of doing with people's appearance, you know?
That's a very
and
interesting
then
thought.
When they had the whole thing with going through his memories and she like is able to talk, I was like, oh, okay. So they know for sure.
Yeah.
Fuck.
And the way that he makes his brain makes the connection to Katniss too is just like, you know, cause Deli's trying to be very careful about what she's saying, but just like, you know, this vague, you know, reference to like an accident that happened is enough that and apparently he was aware that there was a fire, you know, at 12 and that 12 is gone. Like we talked about that earlier in this episode. We weren't sure like what all he knew.
Yeah.
But clearly he knows that 12 burned down and in his mind, and they convinced him that it was Katniss's fault somehow. Which I'm sure the Capitol's line is, it is her fault. All of this is her fault. So any destruction that happens anywhere is not the Capitol's fault. It's Katniss's fault, and it's the rebels' fault, because that's how power operates, and that's how it frames things, you know? It's never like you can have, you know, two sides that are so unevenly matched, and the more powerful side will always lay the onus on the people, you know, attempting to fight their oppression, and because they're attempting to fight that, then everything bad that happens is their fault, because you should just fucking basically sit there and suffer.
Yeah.
And anything you do, you're bringing all of this, you know, all of this destruction down on yourselves. It's your fault, you know, for daring to fight back. And also, I want to talk just briefly about this situation with Gale and Beatty, because it raises a very interesting point about what the lines are. And I don't have answers for that, right? But it's a really interesting conversation about you know, we have, and this is always like, I always chuckle because we have all of these rules written down about like the rules of engagement and like what's okay to do in war and what's not okay to do in war, which is really bonkers when you think about it. But then also we just flagrantly disregard them also, you know, and don't hold everybody accountable to the rules that we all like signed, and said this is what we'll do. But you can bomb somebody to oblivion, but you can't use chemical weapons. But then people use them anyway, and nothing happens. And you know what I mean? There's just it's weird. Like we understand as humans that not everything is acceptable, and that there should be lines that are never crossed. And we go through the motions of enacting these rules, but then we just disregard them at will.
Yeah.
And like, if I am aligned with 13 and I'm aligned with the districts and I want the capital to fall, then it's giving very much by any means necessary. But then you know, which is a very easy thing to say. It's a very flippant thing to say, but it's also like a very real thing to say, like when you're fighting for your freedom by any means necessary. But then what you don't want to do is look too closely at those means, right? Because then you start seeing the type of, things that we're engaged in. And this thing about, what was one of the lures / bombs they were working on, which is like set off a small explosion so people rush in to help, and then set off an even bigger one once everybody gets there.
Yeah.
It's just not
I was reading that
far-fetched.
chapter on the day that the thing happened with the food supply. For those who are not aware, there was a whole situation in Palestine where aid was dropped, and then soldiers unleashed fire at the people running in to get medical supplies, food, claiming that they were afraid for their lives.
Yeah, they were being overrun.
And like, these people don't have weapons, and you have like fucking machine guns. Like, what are you talking about? It's the same thing as a cop. Like, I thought that he had a knife. You have a fucking gun, and you can't figure that out. Shut up.
Did you see, know, we're like dropping all kinds of like food now. The US is dropping aid in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh,
wow. Cool.
So people are uploading videos of what we're dropping. That shit's expired, yo.
Oh,
a lot of it.
Wow. We can't even fake giving a shit, right?
A lot of it is like very old. At least what people are sharing expired. A lot of it is like, it's a majority Muslim country. We're dropping like all kinds of shit with like this, not like kosher to eat. It's not halal.
God, we are pitiful. That shit is pitiful.
Yeah. I'm trying to like get more, like I'm desperately searching for like information that says that what we did was helpful. And I'm not saying it's not out there. I'm just saying I haven't come across it yet. Everything that I've seen has been no bueno.
I just can't, like, the fact that we are out here giving all this aid to Israel and all of these deals, and then we're trying to help, like, come on. Like, come on. Stop playing in all our faces.
It's got a big election coming up. And like, I don't want to, I know we got to wrap and everything, but like, if you've been paying attention to how the U.S. talks about things, you may have noticed a shift in what they're communicating. Like recently, they've been calling for a temporary ceasefire. Temporary. At least like 6 weeks, they're saying. And, we got a real big election coming up, and I think that there are a lot of people who have been very clear about what they need to happen if they're going to support, Biden. And,
Yeah.
I don't know if the administration is reacting to that or if, I don't know, but it feels very disingenuous when you look at our actions. The words are not keeping that same, the words and the actions aren't like matching energy.
So that's that. I feel so bad for Deli being put in this position where she's trying
did
to,
really well considering.
She really did, she gave it a really solid shot and was like smart about what to bring up and everything. It is not her fault that shit didn't go right.
Yeah. I mean, like he switched on a dime, like, he went from making that connection in his brain, remembering about the fire, and that was the trigger. It was all he needed was that, to leap, because he basically leapfrogged from like nothing to Katniss.
Yes, basically, yeah.
And I don't know, like this is it reversible? Can they get him back? I mean, as the venom leaves his system, but is the damage done? Have they forever altered his brain? I don't know enough about like neuroscience to get into like where our memories are stored and how you access them and and all that jazz. But I bet that'd be really interesting if somebody did know about that stuff. Because I don't know, like it's when you talk about altering somebody's way they view the world around them and the people in it. And it's just like behavior modification is one thing, but this is also a chemical modification.
Yeah.
And the two in tandem, I don't know, guys. I don't know if Peeta comes back from this. I mean, I really hope he does. It sounds like Plutarch and Beatty didn't have a lot of information about this whole hijacking process, but it sounds like it's very experimental. So yeah. maybe it hasn't been perfected, and maybe that will be like the loophole, like the wiggle room that they need because this process hasn't been perfected yet.
Yeah.
But also they don't have a lot of info, and maybe it has been perfected and we just don't know yet. You know what I mean?
That's a point. Yeah. Yep.
But I mean, he was like, I don't like the expression stark raving mad, but
yeah, it does feel extreme. God, thinking that she's so a mutt.
It's so sad. It's so much sadder than I was expecting. Oh, this is a tough one, y'all. This is tough. Yeah. This is a tough note to end on.
I'm sorry. Yeah, this is a tough book. And, I've mentioned before how like it had sort of a mixed reception. And I think that some of it is that it is a lot of really tough scenes. And it's not as like, it's not playing nice and hopeful for the third book on that in the way that I think a lot of people have come to expect.
Agreed.
YA.
Yes. This is the redemption. This is supposed to be when our side starts like getting some wins, and I mean, granted, there's still plenty of book left, but my God, it is not feeling like our side is getting enough wins in the ways that matter, you know, for the characters that we've come to care about, and maybe that's how this goes. Maybe it's not about our individual characters that we've come to love and that they make it out safely with happy endings. Maybe it's a bigger story than that. And maybe there are going to be significant losses on the way to that end. And I'll say this is the only thing that I require. She has to murder Snow. It has to be her. It has to be her. I'm not gonna be satisfied if it's anybody else. Maybe Peeta. But
at first I thought you were like, maybe she murders Peeta. I was like, wait,
no.
no, maybe Peeta murders Snow. Okay,
Right.
I got it.
But like, I mean, everything else, whether the Capitol falls or whether this all ends up just like being even bleaker than I would want, which is just like, at the end of the day, the system is the system and it just chugs fucking along, which is a bummer of a story, but would not be that far from reality. I need her to see the life drain out of Snow's eyes. Is all I'm saying.
Okay, noted. Man, I don't even know. Like, there's so much still to come that I have a hard time remembering that it's all happening in one book. There's a big part of me that feels like what's coming up, it happens in the next book. There is no next book. Unless you count like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which it's a prequel.
Right.
I think that, did I tell you what that book is about?
I think you did a little bit, but you were being kind of cagey because you weren't sure if it was something we were going to cover. I remember you saying you didn't necessarily feel like you wanted to cover it, but you didn't take it like off the table completely. So I think you were a little like, kept it super vague just in case. I
also wasn't like, we hadn't reached a point where we had gotten to know the character it's about at all. So I wanted to sort of keep it under wraps how much they are involved in the story later. But Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is a prequel about President Snow.
Oh.
Which is like, I guess. Like,
that's funny. It's funny.
This is a surprising subject.
She calls him a snake in this chapter. Or the Finnick chapter,
true.
rather. When she finds out about the poison, she's like, oh, perfect weapon for a snake. Do I want to hear about Snow, though?
That's the thing.
I mean, especially now if it's going to do something that makes me slightly sympathetic to him. I'm not interested in that.
I don't know about that.
And then, seeing him rise to power, I guess, could be kind of interesting. But I have such distaste for him at this point that I don't know if I want a book about him.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I'm going to want to cover it in the end after all, just because it will, I think there will be some good conversations around it.
Okay.
If not for the actual story itself. My main issue with it is that it was way too long. And that's my issue with a lot of stuff, especially when it's like, oh, we made this years after such and such thing was popular, and it feels like a little bit of a cash grab. And I'm not necessarily saying that's what happened here, but it just like, there was a part of me that kind of side-eyed it at all existing. But I did feel like, because we know who Snow ends up being, there's a sense of impatience a little bit to a lot of it, where you're just like, yeah, I know where we're going though. Like, we don't have to do all this. You know what I mean? And, I know that not everybody agrees with me. There are like plenty of people who actually enjoyed it, but I personally kind of felt like this could have been a novella. You didn't need it to have as much. It didn't need to be built out as much as it was. But,
well, I was going to ask some follow-up questions, but if we might cover it, you're not going to answer them. So I will refrain.
Well, go ahead and let's just see. Let's just see if I would answer.
If there are any other characters that we know that show up, because I'm not sure exactly how old Snow's supposed to be. So I don't know the timeline. Like, I don't know if it would cover Haymitch's games, or would we get like...
No, it goes further back than that.
Does it go back far enough to cover when they had the last uprisings that Katniss's mom and Haymitch can remember from their lifetime?
Before that, I don't think Katniss's mom or Haymitch is born yet.
Okay, all right. So
Snow's like a teen.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I think probably we will. People have been asking about it, and there's interest. And I hate to disappoint the fans,
You gotta get
all
what they want.
100 million fans that we have out there with our 67 million downloads per day on this podcast. I've got to keep that money rolling in so that I can fill that swimming pool half full.
That hot
I went
tub.
for a swim this afternoon in that money. I am filthy.
You're
It's
like
disgusting.
Scrooge McDuck's just swimming in gold coins.
But anyway, okay. We don't have any new patrons this week to say hi to. So sorry, patrons. Those of you who were hoping to have your name read out, probably you should become a patron and then it would happen. So if you would like to do that, go to patreon.com/unspoiled. And you can even follow us for free just so that you can get the, what do they call that? The lowdown, the
skinny,
the QT, the skinny,
the hot tea.
The hot tea on whatever's going on at the moment for recordings and whatnot. And also, I just wanted to mention, and I don't remember if I've said it on this show, but we're changing up a little bit how we're doing the Witchy Book Club. So if you're interested, first of all, go on the Discord and there's like a whole category for it with channels. But we have decided that 1 month isn't enough time to like read a whole book and try out any of the suggestions in a practice. So we are going to take 2 months to cover each book. And we're going to have like a month at the 1 month point, we're going to meet and talk about how far we've read so far. And then the second meeting is going to be about the book as a whole. And it just seemed to be like an easier pace for people to keep up with. And these books aren't fiction narratives. We're reading like nonfiction sort of instructional suggestions, recommendations for like ritual or practice. And that is not as easy to tear through as like a story in fiction is. And it was just too steep a pace for us to keep up doing one book a month when it's that heavily informational. Mm-hmm. Also, as somebody who consumes audiobooks so heavily, I can't do the audiobooks on books like this. They exist, but it's just like nothing sticks in my brain at all. It is really wild how different. Like, I listen to an audiobook and I can remember things pretty damn well, considering how many different things I'm covering at once at any given time. But you try and give me like a lecture on just any given topic, and I'm so sorry. I need a visual aid. I've got to have something to anchor my brain more for a thing like that. So yeah, I really, when they suggested, because it was other people in the group who were like, can we make it once every 2 months? I was like, oh my God, yes, that's genius. Like, it was such an obvious suggestion in a way, but I didn't think of it. And I was like, oh, this really solves my problem. Anyway. So yeah, if you're interested in joining up the Witchy Book Club, we're going to be doing a book on sigil magic coming up. So the next meeting, which is going to be March, the 9th, which is this Saturday, is going to be the Unsober About Moving, which I'm doing with Cam. The first meeting for the sigil magic book will be on the 16th of March. And then I'm doing Unsober with Rashawn on the 23rd on bowling. Woo-hoo. Which I'm excited about.
I am too.
And then the final book club meeting for the Sigil Magic book will be April 20th. So if you're interested, it's not a podcast. It's a hangout on Discord. And you can be on camera if you want, or you can just be on voice. And we just hang out and chat about how far we've read, what we think, if we are into some ideas or not. We don't always agree. Some people really be into something that didn't work at all for somebody else. And that's sort of what's fun about it. And, I just think that it's a neat way to sort of have like a toe in some kind of spiritual feeling practice, which I feel the need for lately. Listen, when shit's bleak like this, you feel like you got to have something.
I need somebody rooting for me. So I'll ask the spirits to root for me because a bitch needs something.
Yeah, spirits, get on that, please. Thanks. All right, everybody. Thank you all again so much for hanging out with us. I hope that you enjoyed the live read and our coverage. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Bye, guys.
Are you coming to the tree where dead man called out for his love to flee? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.